Our reading this week is in John chapter 9, so grab your Bible and head over there. Jeff and I know going in today that the podcast last week was 20 minutes long. And so we will see if we can cut this one a little bit shorter than 20 minutes. Another personal encounter in John chapter 9.
Yeah.
So, we've seen like Nicodemus and the woman at the well, and now we encounter another personal interaction between Jesus and an individual. And I have to tell you going in, it's absolutely one of my favorite stories. I wish we knew this guy's name so that I could get a T-shirt with his name on it, because this guy is just awesome. He would not have been considered a significant character by the important people of his day. He's just a blind guy who, in their estimation, is blind because his mom and dad are bad or something. But he really turns out to have more insight than anybody else by the time the story is over.
Which is part of the point of the story. When you get to like verse 39, Jesus says, "This is why I've come, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." I mean, that's the whole point. But I do think it's interesting, to your point about what a great man this is. Part of what I think makes him so open is because whether people have projected a moral drama onto his story, given his circumstances. Regardless, with the risk of being cast out of the synagogue, he's a man with already nothing to lose. He's lived his life blind and judged, and so why worry about it? He has nothing more to lose. But this man, one thing I know: I was blind and now I see.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes again, if nothing else, this story is a stark reminder that it's easier to follow Jesus the less baggage you have in this life, the less rooted you are into fame, fortune, the things that this life has to offer. This man already has nothing, so why not stick with the guy who's given me everything?
Right. The quick sketch of the story is that you have this blind man that Jesus encounters, and then ends up healing after some discussion with his disciples, and then the Pharisees wind up confronting the man and trying to account for his ability to see. That's kind of how the story plays out. The interesting thing about it is that the important people of the day, as they would have been perceived, are utterly blind to the significance of what's happened. And the reason they're blind to it is because they don't want to believe in Jesus. They come in with some presuppositions. He's not a good guy. He's not from God. And so whatever he's done, there's no way anyone ought to be believing in him. And then you have this blind man who, of course, has experienced the miracle. In fact, I love this line. It's in verse 30.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here is an amazing thing. This is the blind man speaking to them, because if you back up to 24, what they've said is, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner," talking about Jesus. And he said, well, then here's an amazing thing, that you do not know where he is from, and yet he opened my eyes. And that kind of has echoes of Nicodemus. We know that you have come from God as a teacher, because no one can do the signs that you do unless God is with him. And then he goes on to say, we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him. Since the beginning of time, it has never been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man is not from God, he could not do anything. They answered him, you are born entirely in sins, and you are teaching us, so they put him off. So to me, one of the really valuable lessons in this story is it's not necessarily the important people with the credentials, and I'm not taking a shot at Jeff, so don't read anything into that.
No, I actually agree with what you're going to say.
Yeah. that necessarily are unbiased and just dealing with the facts and able to see what is truth. In this case, that's completely inverted, that here are men who should be in the know, and yet they are completely blind to what's going on. And you got this guy that's ignorant and backward, and yet has sort of this good sense of the common man who's able just to see the fundamentals here. This guy can work miracles. He's got to be from God.
Right. And I think part of it too is, you do see, where the credentialed, religious experts and religious authorities, when this common man, nameless man with common sense and an honest heart, open, eyes are open because his heart's open in a sense to seeing what's right going on, not just literally with his own vision, but literally what's going on in his life and who this man Jesus must really be, or what's working in him. They never actually answer the blind, the now healed blind man's questions and observations.
Right.
They literally just basically say they play the credential card. You were born in sin and you would teach us. I mean, you're nobody, and you were judged anyways by God with this blindness. Maybe is what they're implying as well, or at least your parents were. But you're a sinful man, and we're the experts, and you're going to teach us. They don't answer. They don't give him an alternative way to understand what's happened to him. They just literally blow him off with we're us. And so, how dare you question the experts, the authorities, and the religious experts?
There seems to me to be something really relevant and important to carry away from that with other kinds of controversies that we deal with today. I remember the late Ed Harrell saying one time in a lesson that he attended this lecture by a preeminent scientist talking about origins and where everything came from. And he was, of course, was a Darwinist, an evolutionary scientist. And he says, I'm listening to this guy talk, and I'm sitting here thinking, here's one of the smartest people in the world on this topic, and he doesn't know the truth.
Right.
And I, who have not studied in that field, and I do. And I think we do have to be careful about giving way to the credentials. Just because someone is very educated and has a lot of letters after their name doesn't necessarily mean they are unbiased, doesn't necessarily mean they are unblind. The story of John 9 is anybody can be blind.
Right.
And that God's truth is not reserved only for the intellectual class, only
Right.
for the scholar who went to seminary. That actually it might be, the plumber who
Right.
just kind of has that common man, common sense, who could see what is true when someone maybe very educated is blind to it. I don't think that is recognized in our culture the way it should be.
No, because we live in a culture where expertise is the trump card. And so if you have credentials, then nobody should be able to question you. But, as somebody who's literally an intentional refugee from that world, part of what it means to be educated when you go through that system and that world is you learn all the theories and the ideas that all the other smart people, so-called, ahead of you have learned, written, theorized, whatever. And so literally what you're really doing is you're learning the framework that people have already decided to. It's an a priori belief system, and framework for making sense of things. And so that's, the reason why sometimes we talk about the cloistered academics in the ivory tower. You lose touch with reality for a while when all you do is sit around a bunch of other people who we all live in the same theoretical constructs. Kind of like a house of cards built up theory upon theory upon theory. Mm-hmm. And this is not just, sciences. This happens in the humanities as well, where, whether it's gender theory, or some of the theories in religion departments about how the Bible came to be and stuff like that. And we get so far away from touching grass in academia and, that like the little boy who could say the emperor has no clothes on, just somebody with a little bit of common sense. After all the corruption and all the theories built upon theories, because I've been in the seminar rooms where, you literally see people get pushed back on simply because they're not staying within what the theories permit,
Right.
As opposed to they're actually trying to poke holes in the theories. I mean, It happens. And yet, that gets shut down because we already know what the theories are.
Yeah. So in some ways, the overarching message of John 9 is that we are all at risk of spiritual blindness, which by the way, is a theme we see throughout the Gospels. In fact, you have made this point that very often the actual cases of blindness being healed, physical blindness, are laid beside these examples of spiritual blindness to kind of and here's a Jeff phrase, to riff off, right?
Yeah.
To kind of work back and forth against those two ideas.
Right.
Because the danger of being blind to what we do not wish to see is just so crystal clear in Jesus' enemies.
And so I think, David, one of the takeaways for us, and was as we read this story this week, is, you in one sense you do what the blind man who's now can see does, which is you just keep going back to Jesus. In other words, you work from the simplest things to the more complex things. You just you sometimes we get what we've always been taught or what we believe. You always go back to the text. We'd say today, always go back to the text and build your understanding from the text. Test your understanding not by on what you've already understood, but go back and test it by the text. That's what we always do. You just keep on building from where Jesus is, where you meet him today, which is in the text. That's where you get sight. I think we have to be careful about building belief upon belief that's not examined or can't be grounded in the book anymore. If you can't explain what you believe and why you believe it from the book, you're already starting to replicate the religious experts and what we already know, which is why Jesus, they would say, can't be the Messiah. He's a sinner.
It seems to me there might be a good opportunity for parents to use this story to talk to their kids about this danger in an academic setting, whether it's a kid going off to college. That's maybe one of the first settings that comes to mind. But even in dealing with teachers in high school and junior high and things like that, about the importance of knowing how to respond when someone in an authority and credentialed position is pushing back on something that you believe.
Right.
And I guess you've had to deal with that some.
Well, look,
having functioned in the academic world.
Well, I would tell any young people who are listening to this is just while you have to be respectful to those who are older than you in the classroom. At the end of the day, as a refugee from that world, academics don't actually know as much as they give off sometimes. There is an air of authority because we have credentials, and it does lead to a certain laziness among academics after a while, actually. Intellectual laziness. You get tenure, you do your publications, and then you get used to just because I said so in the classroom. And it does lead to a certain kind of intellectual laziness after a time.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful not to be intimidated by the authorities, which is why this guy is such a hero to me. And it isn't because he's obstinate or dug in, and it isn't because he's ignorant. It's because he saw the sign.
Yeah.
And this miracle that carried a message about Jesus. And that's the beautiful thing about John's gospel, that miracles run under that label. They are signs because they're not just naked displays of power. They are miracles with a message. They're saying something about Jesus. And oddly enough, the leaders can't put that together. But this common guy is, because he's not encumbered by the obstacles they created. He's not the Messiah we want, therefore he's not the Messiah.
Right. Well, they'd already agreed. Verse 22 says they'd already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So the decision's already been made. And so no matter what sign happens, we've already made a decision. This guy is not the guy. And whether Jesus knows that or not, they've decided he's not.
So maybe the message for all of us, and the message we can emphasize with our kids, is that they need to see like the blind man.
Well, and choose to
make a great T-shirt.
Choose to see the obvious rather than literally in the Pharisees' case and the Jews' case, in this story, refusing to see the obvious.
Yep. So great story, great character. Make him a hero in the eyes of your kids because he really has the vision to see when so many others around him are blind.